Welcome to Listen Up NC. We are here to bring you the latest tools, resources, and information you need to know to be informed on issues that are impacting you, your communities, and your families. I am your host, Dr. Landon Mason, the president of the North Carolina Community Action Association and the executive director of the Economic Improvement Council, located, of course, in the great state of North Carolina and in the beautiful city of Edenton. Listen, radio family, we are just so excited to have with us this morning Ms. Tedrow as we talk about nonprofit organizations because they play a vital role in the state of North Carolina. Not only are they good deeds to be able to help people from all walks of life and sectors, they contribute significantly to our state tax base. We are all familiar with at least one local nonprofit which impacts our communities, but have you ever thought about the collective and statewide impact of the nonprofit sector? It is our pleasure again this morning to welcome Ms. Tedrow. She's the president and CEO of the NC Center for Nonprofits located in Raleigh, North Carolina. Listeners, listen, Ms. Tedrow is the co-founder and former director of Passage Home, the community action agency that serves Wake County. She has been recognized for her decades of experience and leadership within the nonprofit sector. Ms. Tedrow, of course, want to thank you for being here and for the work that you do to build the capacity of nonprofit organizations across the state of North Carolina. Welcome to Listen Up NC.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mason, for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, Ms. Tedrow, we know as we take a deeper dive into our conversation, we know that there are 34 community action agencies across the great state of North Carolina. But can you tell me the number of nonprofits working to address the needs of North Carolinians every day here in the state of North Carolina?
I sure can, and let me just also give a shout out to the community action agencies. Having worked and led one in Wake County, I know of the critical work that community action agencies provide every single day on the front lines in communities across our state. So let me just say a great shout out and thank you all who are serving in community action agencies that are nonprofits for the work that you're doing. Across the state of North Carolina, we estimate that there are about 37,000 charitable nonprofits serving our communities all across the state. It's an impressive number.
Yes, ma'am. Awesome. And can you tell us a little bit more about the different types of nonprofits that make up your membership at the NC Center for Nonprofits?
I sure can. What I like to say is that our tent at the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits is very wide and comprehensive. We serve organizations that from PTAs and Boy and Girl Scout community organizations to very large private hospitals and universities. So we run the gamut and we really try to serve as best we can the different subsectors of the nonprofit sector.
Beautiful. And so at the NC Center for Nonprofits, could you just share with us a little bit more regarding, the work that you're doing around that particular nonprofit?
Sure. And the nonprofit sector itself provides about 1 in 10 jobs.
Okay.
The state. For every 10 jobs, someone is employed in the nonprofit sector, 1 out of 10. And that was pre-pandemic. And pre-pandemic, we're going to begin to say these things, right? What happened before, what happened after. But pre-pandemic, we provided as a sector a $4.5 billion impact to the state's economy. And we know that the organizations are providing everything from direct care to arts organizations, to, as I said, education, etc. And what the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits does is provide capacity building services for all of those organizations. Our mission is to educate, advocate for, and connect nonprofits across the state.
Now that's huge. That's a tall order. Because as we've indicated, there are 34 community action agencies in the state of North Carolina, and we're leveraging over $450 million.
Right.
And so when we talk economic impact to the state of North Carolina and adding to that tax base, could you just kind of share some additional information as it relates to the back end, or what a lot of people don't understand? Yes, they see some of the work that we're doing, but in terms of the economic impact, how it's really impacting economically the state of North Carolina.
Well, as I said, we have a $4.5 billion economic impact. That means that we're contributing to the state's economy at $4.5 billion. It's actually more than even what the private small business sector contributes to the state's economy. We have to think about in each of our communities, there's really no aspect of community service that isn't provided by a nonprofit. So if you think about housing, nonprofits provide affordable housing.
Yeah.
If you think about education, nonprofits are providing education. Certainly the CAP agencies and community service block grant dollars are providing Smart Start funds. So education is really very central to what we do in the nonprofit sector. The arts organizations have been adversely impacted because of COVID, but they provide for the quality of life in all of our communities. So you can see that there's really no aspect of our community life that isn't touched by, nobody goes through their day without having a nonprofit involved in some way in the services that they receive.
Now, and again, that's huge. I mean, it's major. And a lot of times the impact obviously is so great, and it's so great in the sense that it can literally serve as a quiet storm, only because the work is so great, but obviously the stories are not really being told in the sense of the impact of how but we know that we're doing it. Obviously, as it relates to our stakeholders, as it relates to those that are on both sides of the aisles, really looking at the economic impact that nonprofits bring to the state, the tax base. I mean, it's huge, because there are a lot of social problems within our communities, and we have boots on the ground in these nonprofits to make sure we're meeting those needs of those particular families. And so the work that you're doing, even with your nonprofit, I mean, it's huge, because the impact, again, it is so incredible as it relates to what we're doing across the state of North Carolina. And as I share that, Ms. Tedrow, we know these organizations are doing incredible work across the state. We know that. I'm really inquiring, what has been the impact as we talk about COVID-19, and you alluded to it. Could you share with us the impact of this COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes, and quite honestly, the pandemic has devastated many nonprofit operations and their ability to fully meet the needs of their communities. And I like what you said, that we're boots on the ground. I always like to say that we're the second responders to every disaster and crisis that hits our communities. So we always want to thank the first responders. Always. They go toward the fire rather than away from the fire.
Wow.
And in addition to that, the nonprofit sector are the second responders, and we're the ones who stay. So we go toward the if the first responders have gone toward the fire, we go toward the ash. And I mean that we're there to help rebuild the community, to help people cope with the disaster in their community. So let me just highlight a few data points that we have. The North Carolina Center for Nonprofits and the North Carolina Office of Strategic Partnerships at the state level completed a survey, and we received over 2,000 responses. What we learned is, because of COVID, 94% of North Carolina nonprofits say their operations have been affected. 3/4, 75%, have lost revenue during those first 3 months of the pandemic, and 87% anticipate that their revenues will be lower than normal over the next few months. 40% experienced an increase in demand for services between March and June, and 3/4 expect to have higher than normal demand for services over the next 6 months. That said, 30%, while the demand for services is going up, 30% expect to lay off staff in the next 6 months, and 11% anticipate going out of business in the next 6 months. That's staggering to me.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. In the pandemic, of course, there's a lot of adverse effects that's touching every sector of our communities.
That's
and
right.
As you indicated, it's really alarming just to see how this whole pandemic is unfolding and the impact that it's making in various sectors of our community. You said something that really, really scratched me where I itched. You talked about being a second responder. This work of community action, I can promise you, Ms. Tedrow, I've drank the Kool-Aid. I mean,
Yep.
This work is just so amazing in the sense that when you're fully vested and you can see the outcomes and results of our work, I mean, it's phenomenal. And when you talked about being second responders, I mean, we always hear about the first responders, and we always give them our support, and we always lend them, encouragement. However, there is something that really resonated this morning with me when you talked about second responders, because, as you indicated, after the fire is out and there have to be ashes, then we come in, community action agencies, we come in across the state of North Carolina, and we provide a level of support and ongoing assistance. And then some of this could pan out to be a span of not just 6 months, not to a year, not just a year and a half, but we're talking, 2-3 years sometime before communities fully recover, only but to discover that there's another storm out on the horizon that's threatened to come in. And obviously that which we have built up, obviously is threatened because of uncertainty that's on the radar. And
That's
so
right.
when you talked about, being a second responder, I mean, that's huge in the sense that because it brings another realm of value to the work that we do on a day-to-day basis across the state of North Carolina. And so I really wanted to chime in on that, because we constantly hear in Radio Land, we constantly hear about first responders, and that's actually accurate because they're the first ones that's on the scene. And oftentimes, once they get the particular mission resolved, then there has to be a rebuilding process. And then that's where we come in to be able to provide that level of support and assistance. And so that really, really, intrigued me how you were able to roll that out, Ms. Tedrow, because you're absolutely right. We are definitely the second responders. And in keeping with that, Ms. Tedrow, in your estimation, have you seen nonprofit organizations rise to the occasion to meet the ever-growing needs related to COVID-19 pandemic?
Oh, Dr. Mason, absolutely. And in addition to that concept of us being second responders,
Yes.
I think about COVID and the response of nonprofits, particularly those that are direct service organizations. I know from my experience that when disaster would hit our community, our staff, and we tell our staff, oh no, you can't do this or you can't do that. You can only work 40 hours. You can, slow down. You can't do everything. Our staff, our employees, can't be kept home. They're so committed, and their work is their mission, their purpose. And so, and I've seen this in community action agencies, in housing support organizations, those who are helping those without homes. We just can't be stopped. We just have got to live our purpose and our mission. And so in this COVID, to answer your question about how have nonprofits managed to meet these ever-growing needs related to COVID, they have just worked together. They've reached out to collaborate with each other. They've shared resources, and they're struggling. And so I think it's really important when we give credit where credit is due to those first responders. Let's really remember the value and the sustaining power and support that nonprofits bring to each of our communities, without which we could not really sustain our communities.
Wow. And you're so right, because as you indicated, the work, the dedication that comes out of staff, it's really incredible. There is no price tag you can put on this. This is a matter of the heart. Right. And because we believe in our mission, we believe in our objectives, we believe that at the end of the day, our presence will make a difference. And so you're definitely on it. And in sharing with that, Ms. Tedrow, could you please describe for us some of the services and support your office is providing?
Well, thank you for that question, Dr. Mason. As I said a few minutes ago, the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits has as its purpose, its mission, is to educate, advocate, and connect nonprofits across the state. We do that for both members and non-members. During the COVID crisis, at the very beginning, we made a very strategic and intentional decision that all of the resources that we would line up that would be timely, relevant, and reliable, fully curated to give good information to nonprofits would be open to our membership as well as non-members, because we felt it is so important that the nonprofit sector stay informed, be fully informed about how to respond during this time. So we if you go to our website, ncnonprofits.org, you will see a COVID-19 page. And if you click on that, you'll see a whole wealth of information curated by topic. I think it's really important for folks who are listening to know that there is this really good resource to go to where they can read through and learn. The other things that we have done as an organization, we're a capacity building organization. So we have held special programming, webinars, member-to-member meetups, so that people can join together online and learn from each other as well as from ourselves. And we have just begun an Institute for Nonprofit Management and a EDI Executive Roundtable. And when we think about COVID, we think about the direct impact for all of us, but we all know that it has disproportionately impacted lower wealth communities and people of color. And so we have also tried to address the issue of structural racism as we're talking about the impact of COVID.
Beautiful. And so, Ms. Tedrow, you've said so much that really helped bring the sense of enlightenment to these processes and procedures that your office is constantly and consistently doing to provide those level of services. And we can't say enough how we appreciate that as citizens here in this great state of North Carolina. And so you are definitely doing your part. My next question is this: what can we do as a community, including private businesses, foundations, individual, faith-based sector, to support the work of the nonprofits across the state?
That's a great question, and I'd like to sort of separate it in the same way that you did, because there are different responses depending upon what your resources are. So for private businesses and for private foundations that make up the philanthropic community, provide flexible funding that allows for longer term planning where possible, to give multi-year grants. This COVID is not going away, and organizations need to have a long runway for planning and for implementing rebuilding programs. And when organizations are seeking funding, try to minimize the application process and the paperwork, because we don't have a lot of time right now to do paperwork. There are people who are truly dying in the street, and we want to be able to pay attention to them. For individuals, you know, even if from your own home, there are things that you can do. Call your favorite charity if you care about food insecurity. Call your local church and find out how you could be calling on your neighbors to find out if they have enough food and how to get that food to them. From the public sector, which is the government, we at the Center for Nonprofits have really been paying attention to public policy and advocacy. And so we're really, in fact, we had a press conference yesterday with our congressional delegation, and we focused on a few key public policy areas that if I may just mention them.
Yes, ma'am.
It's really important in this impasse now in Congress about how to help our communities. We're right there advocating for nonprofits, because we know, as I said before, as we said, we're second responders. So we need to continue the emergency funding programs and make sure that nonprofits are at the table to receive those. We need to be able to strengthen charitable giving, because the incentive was taken away in the tax program a couple of years ago. Some of that needs to be returned so that individuals can get a tax deduction for their generosity and to help influence, because we know that it does. We want the loan programs that have been made available to be extended to mid-size and larger nonprofits. We have large nonprofit food banks across the state. They need help, and they have depended on volunteers, and now many volunteers can't go to the food banks because of social distancing. So we need special loan programs for them. And then the state of North Carolina, thankfully, has helped with the federal unemployment coverage. But at the federal level, we're really needing to make sure that nonprofits are held harmless in having to pay back unemployment insurance. Those are a few of the things that I think really can help make a difference at both the private, corporate, and public in those sectors.
Beautiful. Ms. Tedrow, we really want to thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice. It's very meaningful to the citizens here in the state of North Carolina. We appreciate the work that you constantly and consistently do. And we definitely want to encourage our listeners. For more information, you can visit the NC Center for Nonprofits, and you mentioned that website. I just want to mention it one more time.
Thank you.
www.ncnonprofits.org. ncnonprofits.org, and you can learn so much more about the actual opportunities that Ms. Tedrow has presented to us this morning. Well, Ms. Tedrow, our time is up. Radio friends, we want you to meet us here on next Saturday, and to find your local community action agency or Head Start program, you can visit us at www.nccaa.net or www.headstartnc.org. Until next week, be safe and listen up, NC. Have an amazing day.